All right, welcome to the November 13th OpenJ9 community call. The usual reminder to add your name and affiliation to the attendee list just so we know who's joined. It's the first time joining, the link to the agenda is in the planning Slack channel for OpenJ9. So the first thing we do every week is open up to any community discussion. So if there's any particular issues or topics people would like to bring up, now would be a great time to do it, particularly if they're user related. Okay. Originally, we were going to have a blog post or a lightning talk this week about our new website updates, but that's been delayed until next week, hopefully. Andrew, we were going to have a playback of the time zone update. Were you ready to do that this week, or did that have to be moved as well?
That's going to be a little longer, I'm afraid. Maybe next week.
Okay, I will tentatively schedule it for next week then. All right. So the one other thing we had talked about having a discussion of is how to handle the multiple shared classes caches and the ability to create a cache on one machine and move it somewhere else with the big uptick of Docker. And so we had planned to have a discussion around issue 7710, which I'll open up now. Erwin, do you want to take the lead on running this?
Sure. So this issue so far just contains a list of concerns that I've thought of / people have brought up in the hallway discussions I've had with them, I guess. And I wanted to have start the discussion so people from other components could look at this and, either determine other concerns or, comment on the ones that are already here. The gist of it is that the SCC as it stands is already portable for the most part. The thing that isn't is the AOT code, as far as I can tell, and that mainly, I guess, stems from the fact that it's we're going into the realm of a static compiler, and the JIT was never. The JIT has some notion of behaving like a static compiler with AOT and the validations and stuff, but I mean that was never, I guess, something that had ever come up. And so as a consequence, there are things that we have to now think about to sort of allow the compiler to have more of the static compiler notions. But because we're still in a runtime and in the VM, we need to coordinate with all the other components because the VM loads the JIT DLL. So by the time the VM loads the JIT DLL, decisions about the environment are more or less already made. For example, the heap size and the compressed ref shift and whatnot. And so any discussion that we want to have about, how do we make the SCC portable, completely portable, sort of requires cross-component ideas and sort of coordination. The things I've listed up here so far that I've seen, there's, the compiler-specific one, which is have the compiler be able to target a specific architecture or at least specific features in the way that, GCC and the others can do. The second one is something that I don't know if it's absolutely necessary, but I'm bringing it up in the OMR architecture meeting tomorrow, which is the compiler has a singleton, which is a target environment. The problem is that because we have both JIT compilations and AOT compilations, and the AOT compilation is technically optional, we can at runtime decide, do we want to do an AOT compilation or not? That means that we almost need to be able to change the target environment and have it so that it's local to a compilation, so that if you're doing a JIT compilation for only to exist in the current process, then follow one target, because there's no reason to target a lower processor if you're only going to run code in this process. But if you're going to generate portable code, then maybe target a different processor or whatever, right? So I'm going to bring that up there because a lot of the changes are going to be in OMR, and we'll sort of see what comes out of that tomorrow. Then the remaining are just things that I've thought up slash people have brought up. Like for example, maybe one way of sort of having a cross-component coordination is by having a new option in the share classes or something else to say, we're running in portability mode, so that's going to mean, we're doing a certain set of decisions that all components are going to agree on, and what that decisions are, I guess, is what we're discussing. Another idea I had was to, save the option strings to SEC in case we wanted to go down that road. And then the other two are more just consequences of things that are implicit right now, but we need to, I guess, think up all the different implicit decisions that have been made, and think about what the consequences of all that are. The two that, Mark brought up the compressed shift amount, and then Philip brought up the write barrier, but I'm sure there's others. So that's, I guess, what I wanted to bring up, and that's the background for this discussion.
Thanks, Erwin. So do you want to take these things and have a quick discussion on each of them in turn, or do you want people just to jump in with ideas or information sort of anywhere, and we'll try and keep notes on it as we go?
I think because this is the very first one, it's probably better, the different components and different people have concerns or ideas that they might have. And then we can, I guess, once we have a bigger list than what I have here, we can maybe, coordinate it. Because, for example, the first one has to happen regardless. We need to put that in for just, the sake of the JIT. Like, we need to at least be able to change. That's a compiler specific thing that doesn't matter too much. But the other ideas like the compressed refs and the heap sizes and all the other stuff, which is not something. It's something that the JIT depends on, but it's defined before the JIT even is loaded. That's like a runtime, the entire JVM decision that I guess we should discuss. And so I figure, if there's other JVM, things of the JVM scope that I haven't thought of and other people can think of, that would probably be helpful, because then we can, prioritize, triage, and sort of figure out which ones are worth doing. Do we want to go down the forcing the compressed shift amount? Do we want to store the options, the SEC, like that kind of stuff? Is the way I'm seeing it. I'm open to whatever format you guys want to do.
So I'll open it up to anybody who wants to jump in on any of these topics, or any of the 6 points or others that Erwin has listed here, or if there's other things people can think of. Off the top, there are a couple of things that I was wondering about, where you talk about defining a baseline target processor and features, and is that global for the SCC, or were you seeing that as a per compilation set of flags?
I think for simplicity, it might be easier to do global to the SCC, only because if you have it as a per compilation thing, the way we validate the environment is we only validate it once, to say, hey, like we can load all the code in the SCC. So if we do try to limit it to a per method thing, we're gonna have to do something where the superset of features applied on one method, the features, you can't ever add I don't know how to put this in without sounding roundabout. It becomes sort of a dependency issue where you need to know what the maximal set of options features were for a method in the SEC, and sort of keep track of that. And it might get complicated when you have, disjoint sets of options and disjoint sets of processor features, and trying to figure out, which one is valid and all that kind of stuff. So I'm thinking, if we just, for simplicity's sake, we already do it now anyways, we require that the environment sort of be consistent across all the methods in the SCC, maybe it's better to start with that, and then if we want to get fancy afterwards.
I was just wondering if it would be easier in terms of the multi-layer caches if it was defined somewhat on a per method basis. And so you simply failed to load a particular AOT method if its set of mtune or march style bits didn't match the current processor.
Yeah, we'd have to change the way the validations work, but I mean, I don't see why it couldn't be added to a per method, except for it taking up a bit more space. And we could just each method already has a method header, which has some bits. You increase the number of bits, it just takes up more space. That's all.
And if you're not locked to one set of features, if you can't use the existing AOT, you could create new AOT for the processor you're running on and add that to the cache as well.
Yeah, I don't know how that works exactly right now. I think when we store it, I don't know how it's indexed into the SEC. I'd have to look at the code to see if we're indexing it based on like the raw method or something. I don't know. I'd have to take a look. Or the offset of the raw method, whatever that is.
It would probably obsolete the old AOT and create a new AOT.
Right,
so
okay.
From that on, you'd only be able to find the latest one.
Okay.
But if we're talking a multi-layer cache, the old AOT might be in a lower layer.
Right, but you never
run into the top layer. So anybody using that top layer, it would maybe specific to their machine anyways.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, we'd have, again, doable, just would require some changes, but I don't see why it can't be done. We just require a bit more sort of, rejigging of some of the stuff, but it seems reasonable.
So saving the options string to the SCC, I thought we already did this for the GC hints.
We do.
Okay.
So we've already got, it's probably not exactly what we want for this, but every time you start up with a different set of options, we save that set of options as a key and associate it with a hint to the GC.
I guess what I was coming with this one was, I'm not 100% sure what my motivation was. I think it was more along the lines of, if you don't want to figure out what the cache was set up as, you can say use whatever options the previous JVM used. Not sure how usable that is, given that every layer would probably want to, every Docker image layer would probably want to set up their own Java options. But it was just a thought.
Okay. Dimitri, do you have any thoughts on things like forcing the compressed shift amount?
Is it required just because you want to have some compiled code be restored?
Yeah, I think it's in case in one layer, in one SCC layer, the heap size was specified such that the shift was 3 or 2, and then another one it ended up becoming 3. The compiled code right now, we don't have any way of relocating shifts.
If we fix this, so it means we should guarantee heap layout in proper place. Otherwise, if you say, for example, 0-bit shift and somehow could not get virtual space below 4 gig bar in another run and some reason. So it would not start in this case. Or should invalidate all stuff in shared classes.
Right. Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah, and standardizing of barriers. Problem that we are trying to use bare minimum for each mode we are running, right? So any standardization would go with more heavy impact. So really, if you don't know what you are going to run, like have some general thing. So currently it would be most heavy barriers. However, maybe we could do something like, I don't know, instead of inline some code in JIT code, do some call, I don't know.
Yeah, I was thinking more not standardize it across all the GC policies, but I mean, Philip mentioned, you know, for example, if we fix the XMX and XMS, then the write barrier for, say, concurrent GenCon is a little bit simpler because we don't need to do as much work. But I'm thinking, you know, we keep it the maximum for a given policy. Like obviously, if you change the policy, you can't use the code. We don't want to go down that road.
Yeah, if we consider that concurrent scavenger, it's not like it's slightly separate as GenCon. Probably we could do something there, but so yeah, it would just eliminate all this optimization we might potentially have.
Yeah, I think we hit this fundamental problem of, you know, you can't have portability and optimal code. You got to trade off somewhere.
Erwin, do we already invalidate AOT code based on the GC policy?
Yeah, because the read barriers would be completely different, and sorry, not read barriers. Write barriers would be completely different, and it would be functionally incorrect. So,
all right. So we already have a mechanism to do this.
Yeah, but I mean, it doesn't check. So looking at the code, it doesn't check the policy per se. I think it's a proxy. It checks the read barrier kind as written, the write barrier kind as returned by the GC, which I think is more or less the same thing. But right now we check, you know, let me see. Let me just double check what we check.
I think that's more for them.
Yeah, so we check if, you know, we're using compressed refs, if ACR is enabled, concurrent scavenge, if we use TM, if we're using, like, I guess disabled traps is essentially XRS. So we have a few of these checks. And then we also check the, let's see. We check the GC policy flag, the options, the lock word options, the compressed pointer shift value, the arraylet leaf size. Yeah, and then we make sure that the JVM versions are the same, JVM and JIT versions. So we have some of these checks. The thing is that right now, if you, for example, change the GC policy or something, it won't be functionally incorrect. It just means that, you know, the whole notion of moving the cache from one machine to another kind of gets defeated by the fact that we won't make use of it, or at least we won't make use of AOT code. So this endeavor is more or less of like, we're completely broken, and more of we wouldn't, like, the benefit wouldn't be there.
Yeah, I can see that, particularly in the multi-layer cases, we're going to want to make AOT that's fairly broadly applicable for the base layer.
Yeah, exactly.
And so,
Which is why I was sort of thinking of, not like portable mode, just so, everyone knows, hey, this is the, I mean, we run the risk of sort of in the second run, um, running in a mode that just because we're loading code for portability, we're not going to generate good code. So we have to be a little bit careful to make sure that, we limit the number of compilations and all that kind of, like, limit the optimization and all that stuff for things that are being persisted in the cache. But then when we're actually trying to do a, production run, like all the code that is loaded will be subpar, and that's okay. But all new code that's generated should be, targeted completely to the current process or current environment. So it would require a little bit of care.
yeah, the JIT and the AOT should operate under different constraints.
Yeah, it also means that the like I'm wondering if we do, for example, if you do say portable mode, and we say that the heap size, the heap layout has to be fixed in a certain way, and the write barriers and stuff are fixed in a certain way. When we then and then we commit the image and everything, and when someone else tries to start an actual container off of that for just regular running, are there any additional constraints that they'll now be put under because of the fact that they're loading from an SCC that requires the environment to be in a certain way? Because, for example, if we said that the code that's been in the SCC has to be set at compressed refs shift 3, then we can't change that in the run. We can't say 4 or something like that. It has to be 3, even for any new code, and also the heap layout has to be the same. So do you think for the sake of portability, we would, for the sake of generating portable code, would any new code and any new runs also be affected by it?
If we have to, the other option is to go more dynamic and make the AOT code load the shift out of the VM where we store it at the start of the compiled body, and reuse that loaded constant throughout instead of using a hard-coded shift.
Right. Yeah, that would require discussions with the code gen teams to see how they do it.
Yep. Can anyone think of any other things that would be affected by this kind of thing, in particular more of the compressed ref shift type concerns or barrier concerns?
One thing might help, but it's tightly related with GAC work. If we could make compressed refs be independent from virtual space, use like hotspot approach to have some base register or something like this. So it would help, because for this case, doesn't matter where your heap located, just its size. So potentially, and really GAC touch most of the places currently. So how expensive it would be, I don't know.
Okay. Yeah, it might be worth bouncing that idea directly off GAC, because that may have other knock-on effects on how compressed refs work. Okay. Just being cognizant of the time, let's wrap this discussion up, and we can come back to this again on another call, or we can book a separate call to go over this some more, or continue the discussion in this issue. But everyone can be thinking about where this is going and what would need to be done with it. that would be good. Maybe also attend the OMR architecture call. Is that tomorrow, Erwin?
Yeah, it's tomorrow. I believe at hold on a second. At 2 p.m. Eastern time.
Okay. So I think let's wrap that piece up now, just being cognizant of the time, and we can come back to this again if required.
It sounds good. I'll get Mark, VJ, Andrew to take a look at your notes and on the issue, and then once it's submitted, and then we can try and have another call, or you just submitted it. Yeah, I'll get them to take a look at the comments, and eventually we can have another call at some point.
Okay. I'm just going to very quickly take a look at the user raised issues. We won't go through the whole list. If anyone sees anything that should be called out for discussion, please do so now. All right, then we'll jump back to the agenda. If somebody does want to bring up one of those user raised issues after having taken more of a look, we can do that. We can circle back to it. Andrew, have you had a chance to update the...
Yes, yeah, they're all updated to today. As you can see, the big uplift is the spike in the Docker hub pulls, wherever they're coming from.
And that's continuing.
It is, yes.
Okay.
It's about 100,000 a day, roughly. One thing I got asked today, Steve Paul, is to get more metrics for this sort of thing. So I'm looking to hopefully create a project to store the time series stats in some database or other, or Elasticsearch or something. And we can then get some better trends and statistics from it.
I've also reached out to George Adams from the Adopt project on this.
Yeah.
Understanding is he's working with Docker to try to get more detailed stats from them. And so once, or if that information becomes available, we'll make sure that it gets shared here as well.
Right. Okay, good.
We'll take a look at our release map coming up. Just a little cognizant of time as we're down to the last 9 minutes. Is there anything on 0.17 to call out again? Or with the 17.1 release? Okay. Then we have the 0.18 release coming up. We're about a month away, just over a month away from the code split date right now, targeted to December 16th. So please, be taking a look at what's in that milestone plan and making sure that we're burning down that list.
Also going to change that to the 15th.
Change that to the 15th, okay.
That's what that's the Sunday, which is, we always split from the Sunday night build anyways, so.
And then we'll immediately try to get the milestone build out. But that, let's see if we can get as much of the milestone work completed early on that, given that as we get later into December, more people will disappear for holidays and it'll be harder to get code reviewed and merged. In terms of the AIX update, we've discussed re-enabling the AIX nightly builds at Adopt. Those builds won't have DDR support, so we'll make a point of not including them in releases. But that way we can ensure that the builds continue to be built and are working in that way and enable us to continue to track the performance of those builds. The one topic we've looked at is that we have had a number of issues show up that have shown up sort of after we've done the release and or have shown up very late in the release cycle. And one way to solve that or to help address that would be to do our code splits earlier. So does anyone have any concerns if we moved our code split dates earlier? You know, branching about 4 weeks earlier than we are today. We wouldn't do this for the 0.18 release, but we would definitely be looking at it for 0.19 and future releases starting for next year. This will give us, you know, more time to for users to pick up milestone builds and test with them, and hopefully bring a greater level of stability into each of the releases. So I'll pause here for anyone else to chime in on thoughts on that plan.
No, you will face problems that changes would not go in that sync you want, so you need to update in two places. And we used to have very long period, right? It's a pluses and minuses. We should look on both.
Yes, it would definitely require double delivery for anything that was, you know, sort of a severity 1 issue that we wanted to have make the release.
Yeah, and by the way, you cannot have too many double deliveries, right? Because you want to, you split it exactly for purpose, do not have most of the changes to stabilize, build, and test it. So it should be exceptional anyway.
Yes. It would be just for those sort of Sev1 issues or particular user-raised issues that are going to affect the usability of a given release. I will also send out an email on the mailing list to raise the status of this, to make sure that all the committers have a chance to weigh in, because I think it would help to improve our stability and get earlier feedback on our releases. So if you have comments on this, you can either comment directly here in the minutes or on the mailing list when I send that out. Is there any update for Adopt that we want to go over now?
Don't think there's anything too significant. As you mentioned, I'm looking at enabling the JDK 13 AIX builds. Don't think there's anything too much other than that.
Thank you for that, Stuart. Joe, is there anything that needs to be called out in with relation to the machines or the infrastructure?
No, just a very quick comment about the UNB outage. I have still not heard of a time when machines are going to be coming back online. So as of right now, we have to assume we're still off until tomorrow at 9 p.m.
Okay. Thank you. And I guess we can coordinate the all clear on that through Slack.
Yes, in fact, the machines might come back up when I am sound asleep. So they may reconnect. A number of them may reconnect on their own. That would be mostly the Mac, actually only the Mac. The X and the Power won't come back up without help. The Macs we set to reboot as soon as their power was restored to the floor.
So I could add Mac back to the list of platforms in the nightly builds, and then if they don't come back, we'll just get timeouts notification in Slack, but that's no big deal.
Right. Well, they won't come back on tonight. They might come back on tomorrow night, before tomorrow night's build. But tonight, you won't. You definitely won't have them.
Okay.
All right. As we're down to the last minute now, I'm going to call this meeting for this week. If there's any other things that we need to discuss, let's move things into Slack, and we'll pick up the discussion there. Thank you to everyone who attended today, and we'll run this again next week.
Cheers.